Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Go Big or Go Home. I am Old Man Troy, joined by the spectacular youngster, Kevin Cunningham, a.k.a. Big Cunny on Twitter. What's shaking today on this holiday week, my friend?
Nothing. Yeah. What about you, Troy? I've got nothing to throw back at you.
Well, getting ready to go back to good old Green Bay.
There you
Leaving on my birthday, by the way. Leaving on my birthday.
You're turning 94? Is that right?
Not quite 94.
Okay.
Not quite. Few years to go before 94. Just a few. We'll leave it at that. But as we talked last week, the Big Ten shaping up. There's a big showdown this week, but it almost didn't get to be that big showdown. I mean, we're going to go over the games, but like we do every week, a heavy run through the AP Top 25. Of course, the new playoff ranking is not out, so we're going to do a basketball show. Maybe in the beginning of that basketball show, we'll update the listeners on the playoff poll if there's any interesting news. But this version of Go Big or Go Home, all football. Take it away, youngster.
Before we're getting started in the AP Top 25, which, like Troy just mentioned, the college football playoff rankings don't come out till Tuesdays. We always record this on a Monday, for those who don't know. So we will cut in, like you said, if we do a basketball season preview, well, we will at some point this week. We haven't gotten that in yet. So we'll get that in, inform the listeners on the latest rankings, but realistically, nothing insane happened this past weekend as far as the Big Ten teams that quote-unquote matter. So, before getting into the show, Nebraska plus 1.5 against Michigan State was our lock of the week a week ago, and Nebraska won the game 9-6. Very sexy game it was, Troy. I got to say that. 9-6. There were 5 field goals in the game. That's it. No touchdowns. Just 5 field goals. And so Nebraska covered, and we won our lock of the week. It seems as though ever since we started like 0-7, we've been like pretty good, actually. So I don't know if you want to throw,
just humble ourselves.
Yeah.
We couldn't be this like spectacular duo taking locks of the weeks in the Big Ten. We had to humble ourselves, have people say, "What are you yahoots doing over there?" And now when it matters here at the end of the year, now we're kind of showing our muscles, our brain muscles. That's what we're showing right now. But take it away.
We also mentioned, too, this was not a lock, but we were like, Purdue could blow out Wisconsin. And Wisconsin won the game 47-44. That was not as high scoring as you may think, because the score 47-44 would indicate, obviously, that it was a scoring fest. But 37 of those points came in the overtimes. So it went to triple overtime. At regulation, it was 27-27, and in the first half, it was only 10-3. So the offense started picking up, and then obviously the overtime period, does what it does to the scoreboard. But we were a little off there, but at the end of the day, Jonathan Taylor getting 33 carries in the game, that means something. So we'll eventually go over that game. But starting off with the AP Top 25, there's really, Michigan still 4. Ohio State went down to 10, I guess. They were, I don't really understand because I think they were 10 last week. So I'm not really following that. But I guess, yeah, I really don't know. It looks like they jumped one team and one team jumped over them. So not really following, but regardless, AP Top 25 has Ohio State at 10, and that's basically where the college football playoff rankings, that's exactly where they have them. And that's, a ballpark of where they'll be on Tuesday night as well when those are revealed. Otherwise, Penn State at 15 in the AP poll, Northwestern at 20. That's it for the Big Ten. Iowa is in there receiving votes, as well as Wisconsin and Buffalo. Troy, Buffalo is receiving votes. And I tweeted out something about Lance Leipold for those that, that have followed the show for a little bit. Understand that we know who Lance Leipold is, the head coach at Buffalo, and there was a rumor like, hey, he could take over the job at Kansas, and that would be a pretty cool stepping stone to get into the Big 12, but the report is, and now it's basically finalized, that Les Miles is going to Kansas, which is just very odd. It's like hey, look, Bill Belichick's going to the Browns. It's like, what do you mean? It's you've got this star of a coach who has won a national title and proven a lot, and he's getting back into the coaching profession by going to Kansas. It's one thing to take Lance Leipold and bring him to Kansas, but to take Les Miles and bring him to Kansas was just interesting. That's kind of the national college football news, really, to take from this past week. Do you have any thoughts there, Troy, on a ridiculous coach that probably could have gone anywhere where an opening was, and he ends up going to Kansas?
Yeah, well, sometimes the pressure can get to you. I mean, I was in the college ranks. I wasn't at that level. But, when you're coaching, sometimes that pressure, I mean, Urban Meyer stepped away. I mean, he went back to a big-time school. But,
right.
You have to think about even professionally for those listening in, wherever you are professionally. You may have been on top of the mountain, and I'm not going to get into my professional career. You know a little bit about it, Kevin. You want to be successful. You get there. You maintain this level. Then you either move on or the company asks you to move on. And just sometimes the stress of what you were doing, you want to get into the profession, but you don't want to have all that due responsibility, if that makes any sense. I mean, I've been there. Yeah. I mean, I told you I'm getting older. I'm an old man. And where I'm at now in my job, yeah, there's some stress in what I do. But if I look back 10 years ago in some of the jobs that I had or a job that I held, and I'm not going to get into it, man, Kevin, I was 7 days a week on call, 24 hours a day. Pretty much everything went through me. And you talk about your life being consumed by a profession, and that's what it was. And, then you move on. And, yeah, the money may not be as good. The luxurious perks may not be as many, but your sanity in itself is well worth moving on to a lower profile position. And I don't know if that's what it is. I'm just giving that from an example of me 10 years ago, where I was in my professional career. Yeah, great. Yeah, oh, wow, ooh, yeah. Look at all this stuff that's going on. I've made it. I'm done. I'm at the top of the hill. But being on top of the hill brings a lot of added stress and a lot of added responsibilities. And maybe that's what Les Miles wanted to do. He wanted to coach again, but he wanted to be a little more low profile and take some of that pressure off himself, off of his family. And maybe he just wants to coach. And there's nothing wrong with that to me. But again, I don't know if that's the reason. I haven't heard him talk or anything like that, but that would be just my 2 cents worth on why somebody that prolific would take a job like Kansas, if that makes any sense to you at all.
I think it makes perfect sense. I think that any of our listeners that are older and have been whatever, a truck driver for 35 years, a teacher for 28 years, a whatever, like my uncle, for example, was a teacher for, I don't know how long, 30 years or something. And he retired, but he stayed as a firefighter because he just liked doing it. And so he did that for like 5-10 years, until he truly retired. So it's just, hey, it brings in money and I like it. And I just want to keep myself occupied, So it's like that for, I think, a lot of people that don't just stay in one job for 40 years and then retire and then just sit on it, for the last 20, 25, 30 years of their life. They get into some type of work, some type of volunteering, whatever, to keep themselves busy, or if it's for a little tiny job that brings in a little money, but you have fun with it. I mean, I think that makes perfect sense. So something that I didn't think of, and you brought it up, so that's why I'm glad I asked you some questions, Troy. Anyway, moving on to the Big Ten. We'll start with Ohio State and Maryland. This game also went into overtime, but this was actually a naturally high-scoring game. 52-51, Ohio State won the game in overtime. Maryland went for 2, and the receiver was wide open, and the play call was pretty nicely executed, and the quarterback just missed them. So Ohio State was very close, probably should have lost the game, realistically. And, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're Ohio State, you went on and you won, but it's really, if there's any debate of, hey, you were Oklahoma at the end of the year, because West Virginia lost. So if it's, one of those where Ohio State, Oklahoma, who do you have as the last team in? Say they beat Michigan, say they beat Northwestern, say Oklahoma closes out. And it's like, well, they beat Northwestern by 10. They had that really impressive win over Michigan, but before that they beat Maryland barely in overtime by 1. So it's like, do we trust this team or do we trust Oklahoma? Obviously, Ohio State's defense isn't spectacular. Everyone knows Oklahoma's isn't either, but at least Oklahoma's winning games consistently, winning games they should. So maybe the committee goes with Oklahoma. I mean, if you're Ohio State, every game from this point, since they lost, basically was a trial, and it's like either you prove yourself that you belong in the top 4 or you're not going to. And sometimes just winning doesn't cut it. Because at the end of the day, if Notre Dame ends up with 1 loss, they're done. Notre Dame has to go unbeaten. Otherwise, they're screwed. They're dropping out of the top 4. Ohio State has 1 loss, and they're proving that it's like this is a truly shaky team because their defense just gives up gobs and gobs of big plays no matter where it is, on the ground, through the air. They've proven it all year long that they just can't stop good offenses. And not that Maryland's offense is spectacular. They had their backup quarterback in because of an injury. And yet they still scored 51 points. The running back still had 3 carries for 155 yards and 2 touchdowns to start the game. I mean, it was ridiculous. He ended up with 298 on the ground against Ohio State. That's a number of records were broken with that one. But overall, I mean, if you're Ohio State, great that you won. But at the end of the day, this type of win could bite you in the butt because either you're a shoo-in and you're automatically getting in the top 4 by winning out, or you're probably screwed with games like this. You have to prove yourself, and Ohio State didn't. Dwayne Haskins played really well. J.K. Dobbins carried the whole load. He had like 37 carries. He did really well. But, again, it just shows that this team's defense is very lackluster. And I said it since the start of the year that I, by far, trust this offense more than I trust the defense. And the offense is as good as I can remember it being at Ohio State. But the opposite can be said for the defense. And that's what this game proved to me.
Well, you're lucky that this is the best offense you've seen at Ohio State, Kevin, because Maryland was taking it to that defense. Yep. If they didn't have this offense this year, they would have lost that game. So I was thinking of you while this game was on. And I was ready to text you, but I'm like, no, I know he's doing a little bit of moving this weekend. But, man, I'll tell you what, Kevin, that you're right, and you've been saying it now for about 3 weeks on this show. That Ohio State defense is shaky at best. They're not a shutdown defense. They're not a dominant defense. And that could come back to bite them. But like you said, they won, but they didn't do themselves any favors. And this is the difference between college football and the NFL. In the NFL, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I'll switch over quickly. The Steelers and the Jaguars yesterday wasn't pretty for the Steelers. They got it at the end. They pulled out the victory. And you know what? Nobody cares. I mean, they do out here. They're talking about it all day, blah, blah, blah. But a fan is going to look, and it's a win. And in the standings, it's a win. And it counts. There's no points for style. However, in college football, there is points for struggling. And as you look at Ohio State, okay, let's say they go and take care of Michigan. Okay, now they win, and let's say they go to the Big Ten championship game, and we've talked about this. Doesn't matter who it is. You've got to blow out Northwestern. After watching that game, Kevin, against Maryland, I don't think they blow Northwestern out. Maybe they do, but Northwestern's going to hang in there, and they've got to win big, whether it's Michigan, whether it's Ohio State, but to struggle with Maryland, and honestly, Maryland's got to be kicking themselves in the rear. There's no moral victory. There's no moral victory. They had that game, Kevin, to be honest. I'm looking at it going, man, all Maryland's got to do is just keep going down and scoring. But you look at it, and Maryland let one slip away in my mind. Ohio State is lucky they got the win, but it hurt them. It hurt them with the committee because you're absolutely right. They have the one loss, and even if they go through, beat Michigan, beat Northwestern, they're ranked 10th. They've got to jump teams. Now the Michigan win would be huge.
Yeah.
But I don't think now if they get the Michigan win that it propels them into the top 4. If they would have dismantled Maryland and they would have cruised through that game, I don't know if they would have gotten into the top 4, but they would have got close. 5 or 6 maybe. Now a win over Michigan, maybe 7. Because the committee's going to look at that Maryland game because it's fresh in their mind, and then Michigan's up. So I think it hurt more than it helped, even though they won.
Yep.
That's all I got.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% there. Moving on. Well, actually, I wanted to mention this too. The teams that they've blown out, they blew out, quote-unquote, Michigan State by 20, but if you watch that game, they didn't really blow them out. They beat Minnesota by 16. They beat Indiana by 23. That's fair, but that's Indiana. They also blew out Tulane and Rutgers. Oh, and Oregon State to start the year. I mean, since basically the start of the year, they haven't looked really good. And that's when they played an overranked TCU team and a bunch of crap. That's it. They went to Penn State and won by 1. So, and Penn State hasn't, proved to be elite this year. Anyway, moving on. Ohio State just, like you said, if anything, that game hurt them. It didn't really help. Michigan hosted Indiana. Michigan won the game 31-20. Indiana definitely kept this close. Indiana they were up at half. Yeah, 17-15. They were up at half. Michigan won the second half, obviously. But I was intrigued to see this because I figured Indiana would play their butts off. I figured Maryland would play their butts off. Both those teams were 5-5, fighting for bowl eligibility, and both of them hung in there, obviously, for a long time. Neither of the teams got wins, but Michigan, Ohio State setting themselves up for next week in the big showdown. Michigan, all Michigan has to do really, I think, is just keep winning because ultimately if your only loss is to Notre Dame in week 1 and that team goes unbeaten, it's going to be hard to keep Michigan out because Michigan's look really good. Whether they win ugly against Ohio State and Northwestern or not, to win 12 straight and to have your only loss be week 1 to an undefeated team, I'd find it very hard to believe Michigan gets overtaken in that 4 spot. So I think it's Michigan's. Here you go. Win a couple more games and you're in the playoff. That's how I see it anyway. But this Michigan-Indiana game, Stevie Scott had 30 carries, the freshman running back. He did well. Peyton Ramsey, I don't know stat-wise. I guess I can look it up now. But he made some plays in the game, only 16 of 35, so that's not going to look great. But he added 50 on the ground. And we knew coming into this game we would find out about Peyton Ramsey and how good this team really was. Not the team, but these young stars in Ramsey and Scott delivered. And Ramsey, I think, did what any other quarterback can do against Michigan's defense, unless you've got one of these elite offenses in college football. Not many guys are going to throw for more than 50%. And so again, he added 51 yards on the ground. Not to say that he had a great game by any means, but he had Indiana winning against Michigan at Michigan at halftime. So, I like Peyton Ramsey, and I think nothing less of him after this game. Shea Patterson, again, did what he needed to do. Karan Higdon, Michigan's running back, ran for 100 yards. Michigan did what they had to do in order to win the game and advance to play Ohio State. So that's all you can really ask if you're a Michigan fan.
Yeah, I think they're implanted in 4 as long as they keep winning.
Yeah.
As far as I know, I said that they have to, that Northwestern game. We don't know what else is going to happen below them, but it would take something miraculous behind them should they. A win against Ohio State, it doesn't matter if they struggle. If they win that game in overtime by 3 for Michigan, That's fine. They beat Ohio State, a top 10 team. But let's move on
Oklahoma,
to the Big Ten champion. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say Oklahoma can't beat another top 10 team. Well, like I said, West Virginia lost. I would have to go back to the AP Top 25 to see, and I'll look it up right now. But Oklahoma doesn't have that, hey, we beat West Virginia twice. That's extremely impressive. West Virginia dropped to 12, so they lost their second game. I don't even know if West Virginia's got the inside track to make it to the Big 12 title game. Texas is ahead of them in the AP at 11. They've got 3 losses, though. So, Oklahoma right now, you'll have another semi-big game or two, but to me, they're not jumping Michigan as long as Michigan keeps winning. I think there's a little step there that Michigan has on them, and they have all season long. Oklahoma's hasn't been ahead of Michigan since Michigan lost that game to Notre Dame in week 1.
Yeah, there's just a lot of unknowns in college football that we have no idea what's going to happen as we move forward. But, this is a big game coming up, Michigan, Ohio State. And so we talked about West Virginia last week, and so maybe now I jinxed West Virginia. Who knows? Because I was saying it's going to be West Virginia, Oklahoma in the Big 12 game. Yeah. Well, that's what happens when the old man talks. The opposite happens. Carry on.
There's always an upset in the top 10. This past week, you had your one. A week ago, there wasn't any, which is very odd. But we figured something would happen, and that was the upset that happened. Moving on, Penn State at Rutgers. Penn State won the game 20-7. Trace McSorley, stat-wise, passing-wise. I like Trace McSorley, but him in the NFL, to me, it just doesn't cut it. Penn State 8-3, 5-3 in the Big Ten. I think they've won their last few games, but I've got nothing more to say. They should beat Rutgers by at least 2 touchdowns. They did. I'm surprised it wasn't worse, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't have much to add here. That's why I told you in the pregame. This show is probably going to be pretty fast, actually. You look at it, I don't want to say it was a boring weekend in the Big Ten, but really the Maryland game and the Michigan game were, Maryland, Ohio State, and the Michigan game, really the 2 biggies. Did Wisconsin, Purdue even matter? No. Northwestern's already wrapped that division up. It doesn't matter if Northwestern loses the rest of their games. And I was talking to somebody about that. Northwestern could realistically lose all of their games, and they're still going to go to a good bowl game because they'll be the runner-up in the Big Ten. And with the conference bowl game alignment, they're the runner-up in the Big Ten. So they're going to position themselves into a good bowl game, even if they would lose. So Northwestern's sitting pretty where they're at. But really, you look at where the Big Ten is last weekend, it was really like one of these, okay, let's get this weekend over with so we can go to next weekend and see this Michigan-Ohio State game. Even though both Michigan and Ohio State struggled a little bit, I really believe that as far as a fan goes, really what's intriguing this week in the Big Ten? Not a whole lot.
Yeah. No, I can't disagree with you. I was looking forward to Purdue, Wisconsin, but like you said, at the end of the day, who cares? What's the real impact of it? There was none. There could be for Purdue if they miss out on going to a bowl game, which would be crazy. But talk about them in a second. Speaking of Northwestern, you brought up the Wildcats. They're now 7-1 in the Big Ten after beating Minnesota 24-14. They just win games. I've got nothing really to add here other than looking at the Big Ten. Maryland is 5-6, Indiana's 5-6, Minnesota's 5-6, Purdue is 5-6. All these teams need to win a game in order to get bowl eligible. I would really like to see all these teams, honestly. There's no, not that I'm rooting against any Big Ten teams, but Purdue would be fun television. They should make a bowl game. That team doesn't make a bowl game, I'd go crazy. That's insane. Minnesota, I just like what PJ Fleck is trying to do there. They've obviously not held up their end of the bargain in the Big Ten, so if they missed it, that would be the one to me that, it is what it is. But Indiana, I would like to see that young team that fights hard make a bowl game. And Maryland, everything they've been through over the last few months, I would like to see them make a bowl game as well. But unless you've got anything on Northwestern Minnesota, Troy, I know you don't like talking about the Golden Gophers. We can move on.
Yeah, I don't talk about them. So I do want to kind of touch on a point though, Kevin. You mentioned some records: 5-6, 5-6, 5-6. And we talk about the Big Ten maybe being the best conference in America. I look at it as 5-6. When you look at these records, does that mean that these teams are all equal and they're equally good? But I know that we've said the Big Ten is the best conference in the United States or in college football, and I'm maybe starting to waver a little bit.
Yeah.
Just because I look at it from the standpoint of mediocre teams. Because you look at Purdue, they can do some good things. You look at Northwestern, even at 7-1, are they a dominant team? Wisconsin hasn't lived up to their billing. Penn State, I know they're kind of in, and I'm air quoting, a rebuild mode. But really, when I look at the Big Ten this year, it's Michigan. And then we just talked about Ohio State a little bit. Yeah, they're a good team. But defensively, would you consider them right now one of the top four comparative to the other teams that are there? And, maybe you can. But this conference, to me, now that we're this far into the season, it's looking a little mediocre. It's not even top-heavy, Kevin. So I wanted to throw that out. I thought you brought up a good point. Okay, so let's say these teams get bowl eligible in the Big Ten. Okay, they send, 8 teams to a bowl? Does that really make them a great conference? Or does it just make them a conference with a bunch of mediocre teams? Yeah. And I'm starting to waver. I really am, and I'm starting to lean and point the needle that way just from watching, especially in the in the West Division. I would have never thought Northwestern would be a top at 7-1. And then you look behind them, and then you got Wisconsin there. Well, Wisconsin's not impressed anybody. And Purdue, yeah, they're fun to watch. But are they a good team? So I thought you brought up a good point there, my friend.
Yeah, just to very quickly go down the list as I'm looking at it. I mean, Ohio State's 10-1, but not as good as we thought. Maryland, mediocre. Indiana, mediocre. Michigan, yeah, they're up there. They're the number 4 team. Penn State, not dominant. Rutgers is Rutgers. Northwestern, 7-4, and has clinched their division a week ago. So that goes to show what the rest of the division's like. Minnesota, mediocre. Michigan State's had a bunch of injuries, but they even fully healthy. Would they be crushing teams they should? I doubt it. Nebraska started the year 0-6. Iowa's Iowa. I mean, 4-4 in the Big Ten. That's, Wisconsin's been a disappointment. And Purdue, like you said, they've got their moments. They're very fun to watch offensively, but it took them time to get to this point. And even to get to this point, they're still 5-6. So, yeah, I do think there's a lot of mediocrity. I think there is a lot of semi-disappointment with these teams. And the top-end guys like Ohio State, like Penn State, like Wisconsin have kind of failed to live up to be really good. I think Ohio State's good. Their offense is really good. Their defense is really bad. That's not a really good team. They're good, but they're not a really good team that, hey, is this one of the top 4 teams? No. I mean, they're not. Their defense, it's not even really close to me. And that's not to say that Ohio State's going to get blown out by Michigan or anything, because I think Ohio State will play Michigan very tough, especially at home, but they're not a complete football team. I guess I can put it that way. Moving on, Nebraska hosted Michigan State. This is another team I would love to see bowl eligible, but they're 4-7. So that's not happening unless you get one of those years where sometimes 5-win teams get in. I have no idea what the outlook is on that. But Nebraska is 4-7 now after beating Michigan State 9-6. Michigan State was up 6-0 in this game until the last 12 minutes of the game, and then Nebraska kicked 3 field goals in the matter of 7 minutes in the fourth quarter to take the lead, and that was it. I guess if there's anything to say, Michigan State's backup quarterback was in there. Nebraska, I was surprised their offense didn't score more than 9. I'm surprised their offense didn't score a touchdown. But hats off to Nebraska's defense, I guess, for keeping Michigan State's very limited offense.
Did you get some new hats this week?
I did not, so I'm really running low. But it's only the first time I said that this week, so I'll try and keep it to 1.
Yeah, well, you're running low on hats. You got to keep it low this week. But we knew, though, Kevin, this game that Michigan State has, one of the better defenses in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
But we also know Nebraska has one of the better offenses in the Big Ten. And so was something going to give? And apparently Michigan's defense just was a little bit better. So was it surprising? Yeah, to hold them to 9 points, that Nebraska offense? Yeah, because they've been clicking. They've been moving the ball up and down the field, scoring points, and you have to give credit to Michigan State's defense. But offensively, here's the bugaboo, a little bit inconsistent. And that happens. And we talked about, Nebraska. We talked about this game last week. We made it the lock of the week. The way Nebraska's have been playing, they're playing better. I know they're only 4-7, but they started off horrendous.
They're 4-1.
Playing a lot better.
They're 4-1 in their last 5. They've beaten a couple decent teams, and they lost to Ohio State by 5 points. There's nothing wrong with that. These last 5 weeks, you got to be encouraged if you're a Nebraska fan, and to win a defensive game like this. I think that's exactly what Nebraska needed. I think winning 42-38, they've done that already. To see them hold a Big Ten team down to 6 points, I don't care who it is, that's impressive.
It certainly is. Certainly is. It'll be interesting to watch Nebraska the rest of the year. Like you said, puts a damper on where they're going to end up and probably not going to make a bowl game. But even then, you look at where they're at now compared to last year, Frost has done a good job. He's got this team, into a mold now, and he's starting to form that almighty identity that we talk about, Kevin. And to have a defensive battle like this, I would imagine Frost is happy with the win, but he's probably really happy that he held Michigan State to 6 points, especially the way that defense had played prior to this. So I think he's doing a good job there. Throw the record out the window. It's his first year, and I've mentioned this many times on this show. He's got to get his true recruiting class, a full recruiting class. I know he's got some guys that committed to him when he went to Nebraska, but he hasn't had one full year of recruiting at Nebraska. So as he does that next year and the year after, this team's only going to get better. Carry on.
Yeah. Agreed. Speaking of impressive defensive performances, Iowa beat Illinois 63-0. And I'm not kidding. You didn't mishear. Iowa won 63-0 against Illinois. And Illinois' offense, honestly, had been putting up points against teams. Like, they would lose 55-35, but they would score 35 points. Illinois was getting their offense at least moving. And so for Iowa to shut them out, again, it doesn't matter who you are. In college football, to shut another team out is impressive. Alabama was tied with the Citadel in the second quarter 10-10. So don't tell me that it's not impressive when Iowa wins 63-0 in a conference game. That's impressive. It's Illinois, or you can say, oh, man, it's Rutgers, or, oh, Michigan State's offense is, half on crutches. You still held them to 6 if you're Nebraska. You still held Illinois to 0 if you're Iowa. That's impressive. Because, trust me, Nick Saban's pissed that they were tied 10-10 with the Citadel. Okay? I guarantee. So I'm not going to say hats off. But impressive performance by Iowa all around, obviously, to win 63-0. I've got nothing more to say. It was just a domination by Iowa. And this is kind of, I guess I will have something to say. This is, if you're Iowa and you're one of these better Big Ten programs and you play a lesser program like Illinois, that's just the way it is, you should beat the crap out of Illinois. You should beat the crap out of Rutgers. because that's what Michigan does. That's what Penn State usually does. That's what Wisconsin does to teams like Illinois. They just run all over them, and it's a joke. That's what Ohio State does. If you're really that good, you crush the teams that you should crush. So,
all right. So, Kevin, I'm going to throw this question out.
Yeah.
Iowa should do what they did, right? But if you're Illinois and you're the administration and Lovie Smith is now there, you know, Kevin, I am probably one of the last people in the world that starts talking about firing people, but I'm sorry. I know Illinois' offense has been doing some things, but what has Lovie Smith done to this program? I don't see progression. I'm going to go on this show and say I think Illinois has to take a look at Lovie Smith, where the program is heading. We've talked about it over and over with young guys continually getting in the lineup, and I don't think he's doing it on the recruiting side. I don't think he's doing it with the talent, and he's not building any type of foundation for this team to get better moving forward, unlike Nebraska. You know, they started off horrendous, Nebraska did, but you can see the improvement. Illinois, okay, offensively they've been doing some things, but defensively, more than horrid. I'm sorry, I think Illinois needs to make a coaching change. I think Lovie Smith has done what he can do. I think you've seen a ceiling. What more can he do? He's going to go out next year and recruit another class and play the freshmen? Because that's what he's done the last 2 years. Yeah. He's not building a foundation in my mind, youngster. And, you know, I don't like to call for coaches to get fired. But if Illinois wants to build a program, they've got to get a coach that's going to lay a foundation down, and Lovie Smith hasn't done it. That's all I got.
Yeah. I'm very hesitant to call for coaches to be fired, too, because to me, if you're Lovie Smith knows how to coach. I don't think the issue is Lovie Smith coaching. I just think him in college, in the Big Ten, at Illinois, it's just not working. Lovie Smith knows how to coach. He proved that at the highest level possible. He can coach. But in college, at Illinois, it's just not working. So you're seeing that. I think if Lovie Smith has Ohio State, what? Ohio State goes, 7-6? No. Ohio State wins 10, 11 games. I don't necessarily think Lovie Smith's a terrible coach. It's just not, this situation is not working for him. You saw what he did with the Bears. He was good. He was very good. But, you know, time just ran its course, and Chicago eventually, they go 10-6, and boom, Lovie Smith's gone. It's not as though he can't coach. So I just wanted to mention that. But I'm 100% with you. I mean, this is his third year, and he's starting a senior at quarterback. And people can think like, okay, what are you talking about? Well, if it's your third year and you have a senior at quarterback, that means you didn't recruit that guy. So you better have someone really good in the wings that you recruited to play your system, and that's not the case at Illinois. They don't have a great quarterback waiting to play. That's not the case. So Lovie Smith has not been able to recruit a quarterback. That's just a fact. He hasn't. And this team will again win 2 games in conference like they did his first year, and his second year they won none. So, I mean, in 3 years, he's going to go probably 4-23 in the Big Ten. And again, you're not seeing improvement. You're just not. There are a few games where the offense gets clicking, but that's it. So I'm with you 100%
well,
there.
Maybe he's buddies with the Rutgers coach that thinks it's a 6 or 7 year project.
Yeah.
I had to throw that out there because in 3 years, Kevin, this is what I'm talking about. Okay, you won a few games. You're hovering around 500, right? But in the Big Ten, that's what matters. Look at Northwestern, 7-4 overall, but 7-1 in the Big Ten, and they're going to the Big Ten championship game. The wins that you need are in the Big Ten, not outside of the Big Ten against lesser opponents.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing any improvement. I like Lovie Smith. I like you said, I think he's a good X's and O's guy. I just think he's in over his head with this recruiting piece. and he's trying to figure it out. Like, well, this guy's better. Okay, that's good. I understand that. Maybe in year 1 and year 2, and you always try to go out and recruit better players. I've always said that when I throw at my past coaching. You're always trying to recruit better players. But that doesn't mean that when you go out and recruit these better players, especially when you're building a program, that you insert them and throw them into the fire. You should have been recruiting guys that are going to help build your foundation, then recruit better guys to fill in the cracks in the foundation. At least that's the way I did it, and maybe I didn't do it the right way. But I don't think I'm way off in left field. That you have to have a foundation to build a program, and he doesn't have one. That's all I got. I could continue talking about this for another hour, Kevin, about my displeasure with Lovie Smith at Illinois.
Wisconsin at Purdue. Wisconsin won the game, like we mentioned before, 47-44. 37 of those points were in overtime. They went to triple overtime. Jonathan Taylor, 33 carries, 321 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns. 321. He didn't have one of those monstrous 200-game performances. No, he had 321 yards. And again, it went 3 overtimes. But you can only get 25 yards in the overtime. So it's not as though he got half his yardage in overtime. That being said, yes, I think he had a couple touchdowns in there. But in general, if Jonathan Taylor touches the ball 33 times, Wisconsin's going to win the game. I mean, I'm surprised he touched it 33 times and they only won in triple overtime. But that goes to show what Purdue offensively can do. And Rondale Moore and his amazingness as a freshman, and David Blau was throwing dimes. It was a fun game to watch the highlights on because, like you said, Troy, I was a little busy. But I watched all the highlights I could, and it seemed like a very fun game. I wish I could have watched the whole thing.
Well, it depends on what you mean by fun. It depends on what team you're cheering for.
That's true. Yeah.
But again, I am a host. I am a host of a Big Ten show. So when I watch the game, I am a Badger fan. And I'll tell you what, Kevin, I'm not even going to talk about the Badgers because, like I said, the season to me has been a huge disappointment. I don't want to get down in the dumps as we do this show. I want to be chipper. I want to talk about something positive, which is Purdue. Record-wise, again, at this point of the season, we talked about it maybe 30 minutes ago. It's a mediocre conference at best right now. But the future, to me, is bright at Purdue. The future is very bright, and you better watch out for this team next year. If they can add some pieces on defense and actually learn how to stop some teams, and again, we'll talk about this. You don't have to have an amazing top 20 in the nation defense. If you have a defense, Kevin, that can make a stop here and there with that offense, it kind of reminds me, and it's funny because, Purdue reminding me of the New Orleans Saints. Wow, I think the quarterback of the Saints played at Purdue. Kind of fishy there, but they do. And what I mean by that is you have a prolific offense that can put up points and a defense that is hem-haw. I mean, you're giving up a lot of points to a Wisconsin team that offensively outside of Taylor doesn't have much. But it's tough to stop Taylor. But the Purdue offense or that Purdue program, if they can find a way to defensively build a defense that is average and can get a stop here and there, that offense, Kevin, to me, holy cow. They're good. They're good. So now if they can get a defense to get maybe just 1, 2, 3 stops in a game, wow. Maybe you see them make a turnaround next year and maybe they're 8-5. Maybe they can go, 9 wins, 4 losses. I don't know. Because offensively, they're good. They can score it with anybody. Now they just have to work on that defense. So I'm excited to see where Purdue goes next year. I mean, this season's not done. They could still get, I air quote, bowl eligible. And that to them, this is one of those things, Kevin. I know I joke and I say, all these bowl games out there. But for a program like Purdue, the bowl game is probably very important because it gives them extra practice time. It gives them more practice time. A team like Wisconsin, I could care less right now that they're bowl eligible. Boo, who cares? I mean, they're not in the Big Ten championship game. So, as a fan, I'm not going to say I don't care about Wisconsin football, but what are they playing for? The Outback Bowl? Or what bowl are they playing for? A bowl that's going to be on December 28th? Who cares? To me, it's a disappointment. I'll still watch them because I'm a Badger fan. I'm just very disappointed. So, again, I didn't want to go and get all down in the dumps and be negative Nelly today. So I'm going to go on the other side and say, hey, that Purdue team, even though they lost, wow, I like that offense. That's all I got.
I won't go negative, but I want to mention David Blau, the quarterback, as a senior. Their top wideout, Rondale Moore, is only a freshman. He's going to be phenomenal. He already is phenomenal. Their next two top receivers in this game, both seniors. Their top running back was a senior. So they're definitely losing pieces offensively. But Sindelar is the other quarterback that was splitting time with Blau to start the year, and we crushed that. And David Blau, proved that wasn't a competition as the year went on. But Sindelar's not bad. He's just not able to throw it for 400 yards a game like Blau is. So I think that in general, Rondale Moore going forward is good. I think that this team has options at running back. It's not just the senior that they have at running back, but in DJ Knox. But I think, yes, that going forward, if you have Jeff Brom as your head coach, and that's kind of my last point here, is that he played college at Louisville. He coached at Louisville for a little bit, not as a head coach, but he coached as an assistant. Louisville fired Bobby Petrino a couple weeks ago, so those rumors have been flying around, and he's done everything he can possibly to say, I love Purdue, and I'm not going anywhere, and all these rumors are false. But at the end of the day, that's what every coach says before they leave. So I'm not saying that Jeff Brom is leaving Purdue for Louisville, but that's just the hottest rumor that's out there, and it's been out there for a couple weeks. So if you lose all these seniors, if you lose your head coach, that's what can possibly happen going forward next year. But in general, right now, and Rondale Moore is spectacular. So I think this team and program, especially if Jeff Brom stays there, they're only on the way up. This team can be very exciting. They're just losing a few pieces offensively. Just wanted to mention that. So that is our last game in the Big Ten from Week 12. And so we are on to Week 13, and it is rivalry week. And obviously, Michigan plays Ohio State. But before that, we have a game on Black Friday, November 23rd. I think that it's Iowa that usually plays these Friday, and I don't know if it's always Iowa, Nebraska, but this is almost becoming a norm now, I believe. So Friday, November 23rd, Iowa is hosting Nebraska. Iowa's favored in the game, obviously. But in general with this game, if you're Iowa, I mean, it's, again, what are you playing for, really? To go 8-4 or to go 7-5? You're going to a bowl game. It's not going to be a great one. It's going to be a mediocre one. And this game is what it is. If you're in Nebraska, this is your final game of the year, most likely, 99% chance. So it'll be interesting to see what Nebraska does on the road Friday night. Well, not Friday night. It's actually at noon for whatever reason. But in general, this is Nebraska's last game. So it'll be interesting to see what they do on the road against what is realistically a better team. But I think, like we mentioned before, this program and Scott Frost is building something in Nebraska, especially if this can be their last game and they pull off an upset at Kinnick Stadium. I think that'd be a nice vaulting piece going into 2019.
Yeah, it would be, but, man, that's a tough place to play.
Yeah.
And I know I just talked about Illinois, but Iowa, an impressive win. I know Illinois' defense is horrid, but to shut out Illinois, I mean, Illinois' offense not as good as Nebraska in my mind, Kevin, but it was playing good, like you said. They were putting up points. And now Nebraska has to go to Kinnick Stadium, which is a very tough place to play. Ask any foe in the Big Ten. So it's going to be tough. I'm not sure if Nebraska can pull off this road win. My prediction, I think Iowa's going to win this one. We didn't even talk about the spread. I would imagine the spread here, I don't think it's going to be a pick'em game. I'm going to go more like, I would say, 7.5 Iowa's favored by.
Yeah, it's 8.5. So you're right there. It's barely more than a touchdown. I'm with you. I'm picking Iowa. I think if the game were at Nebraska, it'd be more interesting. But Iowa should win the game. Will they win by 7? Will they win by 10? I don't know. I'm not going to lock anything, but I'll pick Iowa.
I'm not locking it either. I just was picking the spread.
Yeah.
Like I said, Nebraska's been playing well. You mentioned it, 4-1 in their last 5. It's just Kinnick Stadium's a tough place to play. So I think Iowa's going to win, but I think it's going to be a good game.
Yeah, me too. Purdue at Indiana. This is an Indiana-based rivalry here, and both these teams are 5-6. So this is going to be a fun one. Unfortunately, they play at the same exact time as Michigan-Ohio State. So I don't think a ton of people are going to be watching, but it is a rivalry game. It is for getting to a bowl game. So for both these teams, it's probably pretty important. Again, like we've said in the past, a bowl game's a bowl game, and if you're bowl eligible,
the winner's probably going to go to the Blinker Bowl.
The Blinker, the AT&T Tech, GoDaddy.com, wind blows left bowl. But, yeah. Anyway, this game, Purdue at Indiana, I'm curious your thoughts on the spread, Troy.
At Indiana, both are 5-6. Indiana by 1.5 at home.
Purdue's favored by 4. And
Purdue
I would agree
some
with
love
that.
on the road.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I expect Purdue to win. I think Purdue's I like Stevie Scott. I like Peyton Ramsey, but I like Purdue's offense more than I like Indiana's. And I don't think Indiana's defense is something spectacular. So I will pick Purdue to win on the road. I think it'll be close. I think this will be a really fun game to watch. Unfortunately, I'm not going to live watch it because, again, there's some other game that's going on at the same time. But it should be a very good game between teams that don't like each other and everything in the world to play for in terms of those respective programs.
I got a little excited about when you said the spread because you talk about rivalry games, and I said at that point, throwing the records out, they're both 5-6. Like you said, Purdue's offense much better, but it's a rival game, and there's a lot on this. There's a lot on the plate here. Whoever steals that plate is going to a bowl game. The loser's probably not. There's a lot to play for. That's a lot of love for Purdue from the odds makers. To give them 4 on the road, I think Purdue wins though too, my friend. But I'm not going to lock the points. Yeah,
same here. If you hate Michigan and Ohio State and you don't want to watch that game. That game should be fun. 3:30 p.m. I'm skipping time here. We're going to go with Michigan, Ohio State last because that's just what I'm deciding. Penn State hosts Maryland. Again, Maryland is 5-6. Penn State's 8-3. They don't necessarily have anything to play for, but it's Trace McSorley's final home game, and it's all these young guys on their final home game of the season. So Penn State's going to want to win for sure. It's not as though they're just getting healthy for something bigger. They're going to care. They're going to want to win. They're going to want to end their season on a high note at home. Penn State's obviously favored to beat Maryland. Penn State's at home, Troy. I'll let you guess the spread.
Penn State at home against Maryland, 12.5.
You're doing pretty well. Penn State by 14, so 2 full touchdowns. Could they win by 12? Could they win by 17? Yeah. I think Penn State wins the game. I think Maryland, unfortunately, does not go to a bowl game. But I'm picking Penn State, but not.
I was going to say, woo, youngster.
No.
Little flip of the tongue there. No, I like Penn State too, but Penn State's been a little bit inconsistent. They started slow in some games. I'm not taking the points. I'll take Penn State straight up, but I'm not locking it.
Moving on, Northwestern at home against Illinois. A nice little Illinois State battle here. Illinois can't get to 6 wins. Northwestern wants to be healthy and pull off a huge upset and win the Big Ten and go to the Rose Bowl. So Northwestern in this game, it's Illinois' final game of the season. They'll care it's against Northwestern. Northwestern, they'll want to win, but really, truly, more importantly, is getting healthy and just making sure guys stay healthy, I should say, for the Big Ten title. And that's much more important than beating Illinois. And I still think Northwestern beats Illinois, but I don't think you necessarily see Clayton Thorson, going out there and testing everything he's got to stay on the field against Illinois if push comes to shove, coming off an ACL injury from last year. So that's just how I see it. I would pick Northwestern to win the game. Northwestern's obviously favored here, Troy, but do you know by how much?
23.
18. So not quite 3 touchdowns, but 18. Again, could they win by 17? Could they win by 21? I don't know. But Northwestern should win the game. I am not locking once again.
No, I'm not going to lock that point spread again. You brought up a great point. I think the starters are going to get on the field. The starters may play a half. And I'll tell you this. If somebody gets dinged up, you might see all the starters come off the field for Northwestern. You're absolutely right, Kevin. This game means nothing to them. It means nothing at all. So why would they go out there and play? I mean, they're young kids. So they're going to go out there and they're going to play their behinds off because they want to. They're young kids. They have pride, and it's a rival game. But at the end of the day, the Big Ten Championship awaits, a trip to the Rose Bowl awaits. They're not going to want to jeopardize that by running the heck out of a running back, throwing force arm off. They're not going to do that. If the starters make it into the second half, I'd be surprised. I think they're done at halftime. So do I think Northwestern's talent, depth-wise? Yeah, they have more talent. So I think Northwestern will win, but I don't know about the spread. It could be closer than that based on who plays. That's all I got.
Yeah, I hear you there. Wisconsin hosts Minnesota. I don't really have anything here to say other than, Wisconsin's got quote-unquote nothing to play for. Minnesota's 5-6 fighting for a bowl game, but it's at Camp Randall. Wisconsin is the better team. Could it be close? Sure. But Minnesota on the road, I don't really trust them there. What do you think the spread is, Troy?
Wisconsin at Camp Randall. Jonathan Taylor against that Minnesota defense. Gophers struggling a little bit. The odds makers in Wisconsin this year have been kind of screwy. I say Wisconsin by 17 and a half.
Wisconsin's only by 10. So they're expecting a little closer. Who knows what in the world is going to happen at quarterback. But I hear you. Jonathan Taylor could go off in this game and make it much worse than 10 points, like Vegas is seeing it. So I think you get the case where, Orny Brook might not play. They might keep him, fresh for the bowl game. And Minnesota has everything in the world to play for. And, so I can see why they think it's going to be a little closer. But Wisconsin should win the game. I, once again, am not locking anything.
And I don't give predictions on the Gophers, so I can't even. I can't even talk about what I'm going to do in this game.
Michigan State at home against Rutgers. 4:00 start. It's the final Big Ten game of the week, rivalry week. Michigan State at home against Rutgers. What a treat! What a treat we get to end rivalry week with. Honestly, after the 12:00 slate, we've talked about it. Penn State, Maryland, Northwestern, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and now Michigan State, Rutgers. It's going to be like, okay.
What's the point spread, 71?
Close if you flip the numbers around. Close, not exactly, but Michigan State's favored by 27. I think that's kind of ridiculous because it's Michigan State, and who does Michigan State actually beat by 27 points? But if they were to beat someone by 4 touchdowns, it would probably be Rutgers and at Spartan Stadium in East Lansing. So I'm not locking anything here. Will Michigan State win the game? Obviously they will. If they lose, they would go to 6-6, and they'd still make a bowl game. But
see, this is one of those crazy lines, Kevin, where the old man looks at Rutgers and says, "Are you men enough to not lose by 27 points?"
Yeah,
that would intrigue me with my Monopoly money to take Rutgers in the points.
I just can't
saying.
do it. I just can't pick Rutgers. When we picked Rutgers to cover against Kansas and they lost by 40, that was it. that was it for me. That was it. I can't.
You remind me of a friend of mine named Dan, who actually plays with real money, not Monopoly money, and he has sworn off Wisconsin, Kevin. He will never bet on a Wisconsin game again. And the funny thing is, the weekend that he lost, I would have told him, do not take Wisconsin in the points. What are you doing? But he didn't talk to me, and he bet Wisconsin, and they didn't cover. And he's sworn them off since. So kind of like you and I, swearing off Rutgers after they couldn't cover against Kansas. But, I mean, it's just intriguing. You think of that. And, again, our locks are offering entertainment purposes only, folks. We play with Monopoly money. That's all we're playing with, Monopoly money. We're not playing with the real dough. But this is one of those games, Kevin, where I might, if I was having to put some Monopoly money on the middle of that Monopoly board, I might dig under the board, where you hide your extra money under there. I might do it. You could maybe mark me down for that. I know you're not going to lock it, but you know what? I think the old man's going to take a chance. Going to take out one of those little, a gold-colored $500 Monopoly bill and put her right down in the free parking zone. Putting her down in the free parking zone. Put the old man down for Rutgers to cover against Michigan State.
Troy has Rutgers plus 27 at Michigan State. There we go, writing it down. For next week's show.
Let's see if I actually can land on the free parking space now.
We skipped a game, talked about how that's the last game, and technically it is, but we skipped noon o'clock. I don't know why the Big Ten and why NCAA does not flex this game out to 4 o'clock. I don't know why. Supposedly it's because the not just the weather, but the lighting, I guess. And so it's like it becomes dark. And to me, that's kind of cool when a game starts at like 3:30 and it's light, and then it ends at like 7 and it's dark. I don't know. That's just something I've heard. The Rose Bowl, that's typically how the Rose Bowl works, is that it starts in daylight and it ends in darkness. And to me, it's just cool. I don't know. I don't know why this game starts at noon. I don't. It starts at noon every single year. But
then just make it a darn night game. Just make it a 7 o'clock kickoff. If you're worried about it starting in the daylight and ending in the dark, then just start it in the dark.
I don't know.
I don't know why you mix this game in with all the other hem-ho games that are out there. To me, that's a big loss by the NCAA right here and the Big Ten. Why? Why are you doing this?
I would watch Purdue, Indiana for 3 hours. I would.
It's rivalry week, Kevin. I mean, honestly, Wisconsin, Minnesota. I know I don't talk about Wisconsin. I don't talk about the Gophers anymore on this show. That's going to be a good game. There's things I'd love to say about it, but I can't because I promised this year no Gopher talk. That's always a tough game. It's rivalry week.
Yeah.
People will watch at noon. There's games to watch. I just think this is a big loss for the Big Ten. But carry on to the game, my friend, because it's going to be a doozy.
Yes, it will. At least I hope so. Ohio State at home against Michigan. I'll start with the spread. What do you think it is for?
Oh, honestly, I think Ohio State's defense, like you said, has been shaky. Would they favor Ohio State? Michigan's ranked 4. Ohio State's ranked 10. I really think it's closer to a pick'em game. Michigan better, but they're on the road. Michigan by 2.5.
Yeah, pretty close. Vegas likes Michigan a little more. Michigan by 4. This is the first time in Urban Meyer's 7-year career at Ohio State. It's weird that it's his 7th year. That seems crazy to me. But 7 years he's been at Ohio State. It's the first time he has a home underdog at Ohio State. First time in 7 years. 4-point underdog to Michigan, and I completely understand why. And I will pick Michigan to win the game. I am an Ohio State fan. But I think Michigan is the better complete team. I think Michigan finally has an offense and a quarterback they can lean on so that Ohio State can't just keep Michigan's ground game down and eventually win it 31-27. I think that Ohio State has to put up points because I know Michigan will put up points. But I think that we could see a halfway decent performance from Ohio State's defense. I think the issue could be that Michigan's defense actually keeps Ohio State's offense in check. And so Michigan has more opportunities than any other team Ohio State has seen get opportunities other than Purdue and that blowout. But I think Michigan's offense gets enough opportunities to score 31, 34, 35 points, but it won't seem like they scored 31, 34, 35. I think you'll see Ohio State's one of their best defensive performances in this game because it does mean everything, and it is at home. And you know your offense can score with Michigan. So this defense just knows that it has to make a couple stops, and they'll have a chance to win. I mean, that's the reality of it. I think Michigan's defense ends up getting more stops than Ohio State's defense does. And so I think it ends, 31-28, 34-27, one of those. So I won't lock Michigan because I could see it ending in a 3-4-point game. But I think it's going to be a really good game because it's at Ohio State. And if it were at Michigan, Michigan would be favored. Vegas is telling us they'd be favored by a touchdown, as they should be. They're the more complete team. It's not even close. Their defense is a top 10 defense, and their offense is maybe not top 10, but it's a legitimate offense. So Ohio State is either really going to have their hands full, and I'm just being a hopeful Buckeye fan that their defense keeps Michigan to 34, but that's what I'm seeing. It's like a 34-27 type game. I don't think Ohio State's defense just gets completely gashed in this one, but again, maybe I'm being hopeful here.
You might be being hopeful, youngster. If we were looking at this game 3 weeks ago, I would have picked Ohio State at home. I would have said these teams are even. After watching these teams over the last 3 weeks, Michigan's gotten better or at least been consistent. I know they struggled last week. But Ohio State, to me, Kevin, that defense has gotten worse. I know you want to be hopeful that they're going to be able to shut down Michigan once in a while, but Ohio State, when you look at this, Kevin, against Maryland, I mentioned this. Maryland's got to be kicking themselves in the rear. They had that game. They got out on top against Ohio State. Michigan does that to Ohio State, Kevin, you might as well just take your fingers off the Twitter button because Michigan will control the clock at that point and run the game out and put the nail in the coffin. Maryland's not good enough to put the nail in the coffin. Now, right. I'm not saying that Michigan's going to blow Ohio State out, but you have been a critic of the defense for a while now at Ohio State, and I'm just kind of, on your coattails, just going with you. But then I watch, and I'm like, man, it's really not a good defense. Yeah. It's really not. And, again, Michigan, to me, Kevin, is not one of these high-powered offenses. When I look at it, I would say Purdue is probably more high-powered than Michigan. Yeah. But Michigan is efficient. Yep. Michigan can do it in the air, they can do it on the ground, and they move the chains. And I think what you're going to see is what Michigan will want to do against this Ohio State team, which is something the old man talks about all the time. They're just going to want to grind the ball. They're not going to need and not going to – they'll look for them if they're there. But I don't think you're going to think that Michigan's going to go out there and say, okay, we're just going to go for big splash plays. I think Harbaugh and Michigan are okay moving the chains, just chewing up that defense, just even digging their heel deeper into that defense.
Yeah.
Look, we're going to run the ball. Look, we're going to pass the ball. And, hey, it's a 10-yard gain. It's an 11-yard gain. Ha, look at us. We just had a 14-play, 80-yard drive. I think Harbaugh is going to be okay with that. And what that's going to do, Kevin, is going to limit the amount of time that your good Ohio State offense is on the field. So I think Michigan does win this game, and I think it's because they're going to control the clock. Because that Ohio State defense, if they try to shut down the run, you got Patterson throwing the ball. If they're going to key on Patterson, they're going to be able to run the ball. So I think Michigan just controls the clock. And, you even mentioned it. I don't remember what show. Teams are going to score 28, 30 points against Ohio State. And Michigan is no different. And the only difference is, could Ohio State score 34 to win? Yeah, they could. The problem is I think Harbaugh is going to limit the amount of possessions Ohio State's offense gets. So, unfortunately, youngster, and unfortunately to all the Buckeye fans out there, I've got to take Michigan in this one. But I'm not going to lock it. It could be a 3-point game. It could be an overtime game. It's going to be a close one. I just think Michigan is going to just flex their muscles on offense, and unfortunately, I don't think the Buckeyes can stop them.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you're saying there. Karan Higdon, Michigan's running back, has averaged 5 yards a carry this year, and I don't think that's going to stop against Ohio State. Like you said, maybe Michigan doesn't have the huge splash plays that Purdue does and put up 52 points, but they put up an efficient 34-37. So maybe that's the case, 38. But maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's a better way to put it than Ohio State getting some stops here and there. Maybe it's just Michigan having longer drives. And Ohio State knows that they need to score, and so they do. Ohio State will put up at least 24 points in the game. I'm not worried about that. Michigan's defense is very, very good, but Ohio State will put up 24 at least. It's just Ohio State's got to get some stops. And if they can,
they do. They got to keep the game close, Kevin. That's what they have to do because I want to interrupt you there because you brought up a good point. If they keep this game close, their offense is good enough to go down and score. I know it's a tough Michigan defense, but you've been praising this offense all year. And again, I just kind of ride your coattails. Let's talk about your Buckeyes. But it's a good offense. And you've always said, though, in college football, offense will trump defense. Offense will score in a game, no matter how good your defense is. And that holds true. It does hold true. So Ohio State can score, and that's going to be the key for them. If they want to win this game, they've just got to keep it close. So if Michigan goes on a 14-play, 8-minute drive, that's fine. Just you can't turn the ball back over to Michigan. You need to go down and you need to answer and keep the game close. And then can your defense get one stop? That's really what it is. And do I think Ohio State could win the game? They could, but they got to keep it close. If that offense falters and gives the ball back to that Michigan offense that, in my opinion, is going to grind out the clock, so they go on one of these 14-play drives and they get a touchdown, and Ohio State gets maybe one first down, 6-play drive, it could be a long – I don't want to say it could be a long day. It would just be an uphill climb at that point because that, again, this is going to be the best defense they've played all year. And I have to reference last week, and I know it's probably pouring salt in your wounds there, youngster. But if Maryland had any sense of a hammer to put a nail in a coffin, that game would have been long gone. Michigan has a big hammer, Kevin. They will pound that nail down, and the thing is, it won't be a fast pound. It'll be pound, pound, tap, 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 and then in the third quarter, bam, game over. So that's my quick analysis there.
Yeah, I could see Michigan winning this game by 17 as well, because if they go up 10, if they go up 12, 13, 14, and Ohio State has to pass against that pass rush, then it's over. If Michigan gets up by 2 scores, I think it's over, because then they're absolutely willing to run the ball and just pound it, and Ohio State's screwed at that point. And Ohio State has to pass to get back into it. That's where Ohio State's best, is passing. But if you're down 2 scores to Michigan, and Michigan's got probably 2 first-round pass rushers on their D-line. So if you're just saying, go get Haskins, go get him, he's going to throw it, you're not coming back from that deficit. Not in this game. So that's
no,
really
they would make his day in the pocket a living hell.
Yeah.
If they can just pin their ears back and go after him. That's why I'm saying for Ohio State to have a chance, they've got to keep it close. They've got to have a resemblance of play action. It just reminds me, against any good defense, Kevin, and correct me if I'm wrong, you might struggle running the ball early. You might get 3-4 yards. Maybe you have to punt, but you can't abandon it. But like you said, if they get down by 2 scores, and then they abandon the run, and then Michigan can pin their ears back, lights out.
Yep.
But, and again, Urban Meyer's a good coach. I don't think he's going to abandon the game plan just because Michigan goes up 7-0 or 10-0. He won't do that. The problem is when that happens and all of a sudden they've got to start throwing the ball a lot. You're right, that Michigan pass rush, that front, holy cow, it's good. But that's all I got. We could sit here and talk Ohio State, Michigan probably for another hour, but we're not going to do that to the listeners.
No, that's all I got as well. Ohio State, like you said, Troy, has to keep it close because you're going against basically an NFL front line. So you got to keep it close. So that's all I got. I'm not locking anything. I'm picking Michigan to win as well, unfortunately. But hopefully Ohio State can keep it close.
No fireworks this week, youngster. None.
No.
No.
Pretty sad. Yeah. Very sad.
Well, part of that, though, is rivalry week. And we know at that point, throw records out. They're rivals. Yeah. And at that point, they're young kids. So emotion in rival games in college, to me, are fun to watch.
Yep.
Because they're playing for school pride. They really are. It's not like the NFL and the Packers and the Bears or the Packers and the Vikings. Yeah, it's a rival. But what do? You shoot crap on Twitter to a Viking fan or a Bear fan? No, these college kids, it's for real. It's for real when it's a rival game. But with that said, everybody, for the youngster, I am the old man. Make sure you find us on Twitter. Our show handle, @YoungsterOldMan. And then Kid Cunny, @KidCunny is the youngster. I am Troy Robert 967. Hope you enjoyed the show today. Tune in to The Grueling Truth or watch us on Twitter because this week the youngster and I are going to be doing our Big Ten basketball preview. Have a good day, everyone.